Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll Masech the Zevachim daf Ayin Aleph. We are going to begin on the very bottom of Ayin Medbeis with a new parak. So let's see the new Mishnah. Kol Zevachim. When it comes to any type of carbon, Shnis Arvu, that it got all mixed up with others, B'chatois Hamesais. Let's say, for example, we're talking about the situations by a chatas in which the din is that that animal would be killed, in which Rashi reminds us, as we've had this in multiple places, there's actually 5 times that we say that a carbon chatas would be killed. One is volad chatas. If you have a carbon chatas and its offspring is born, so it's kind of like, what do you do with that? Second is if the owner who was supposed to bring the chatas dies, so what do you do with this carbon so it's killed? Timuras chatas, when you make an exchange, like a din timura onto another animal. In the situation when there's kapara of the Baal, when the owner already received kapara, let's say, for example, it got lost, as Rashi said, or it was a balmum, and I don't think it only tells us 4 of them. Interesting over here. The 5th one is chatish over shanasa, that it's beyond its time. So those are all cases that they all got mixed up. So in that situation, or for that matter, and it got mixed up with regular carbonos, o b'shor haniskol. Now, a shor haniskol, of course, is also bahana, but a fil achas b'meru bua, even if it's a 1 to 10,000 ratio, yimusu kulan. Even though all you had is one carbon chatas that was supposed to be destroyed, but since it got mixed up with all these other ones, we destroy them all. That's the din. Fine. So that's a case. That's the first case of the Mishnah. Okay, now it basically means I feel ella full of bottle. Here it says achas b'ribua. It's maybe being more dramatic over here. Okay, and then the Mishnah says nisarvu b'shor shenavdabo avera. Let's say it got mixed up now with. Now this is a different category. These are animals. As Rashi is going to say, it's going to continue to the next blot. These are all mutter lehedget, but pasul hakrava. So these are all, unlike a chatas, which you have to kill it, so therefore all the animals are killed. Here, it's mutter lehedget. So Rashi says, Zevachim ksherim, b'shor shenevda boyavera, echad be'echad, 1 to 1, mefarish v'azal, maihi. So Rashi says, let's go up top, Kikain shehemus esa adam al pied echad. So the Gemara is going to end up saying, and this technically is going to be a question, the question which really the Gemara is going to say it, but it says over here, Heich mishkachas lashor shaharigas and nefesh the asul gavo mutul hedget. So how is that possible? It's mutul hedget. I thought a shor haniskul is supposed, or sure that din nevera is supposed to be destroyed. So that's the question. That's actually the only question. This is in Rashi, but we'll see it also in the Gemara. But this is really the only question we're going to get, so might as well take it. So Rashi tells us that in the event where you don't have 2 edim, there's only 1 witness, or it was al pi balim. So in that situation, we say it's not mutal hakrava. Let's look at question TB24. Yesh rako echad o moide babalim. So it's the same thing. So I'm just going to write over here Rashi, even though again we're going to end up seeing this again. But let's just at least have one question. It's a very short daf, so let's make it a little bit. Keep ourselves a little bit on our toes. So the shor shehemis al pi balim yipatile maskila. So there's no din skila because we know moed b'kanas pater. So therefore, that's a case where there's no din that it's not usher lehedget. It's mutter lehedget. V'chein roiva v'nirva. So normally, if a person cohabits with an animal, is engaged in bestiality, the din is that the animal would be destroyed. But if it's al pi eid echad, al pi baalim, again, in that situation, it's mutal hejet. Okay. Fine. But it's still asul akrava, as the pasuk says, min habehema lohitzeh haroive v'hanirva. Okay. So let's go back in the Gemara. So let's say nisarva b'shor she'avdu bo avera. So we got mixed up these karbanos with an ox in which did an avera, or shehemas as adam, and it killed someone, but it says beferish it was only al pi eid echad or al pi baalim. It's like just beferish in the Mishnah. Boroiva v'nirva, as we said, in those situations, if there was only one witness, or it was babal, so it's usher to be lahakrava, but it's mutter lehedyet. V'nevid, mukslo nevid, someone who engaged in either mamish using it for avodah zarah or muksa was designated for such. Be'estan u'mocher, or mocher kelev. So an esnan is the payment for the use of a zona, or which if that animal is asur lahakrava, or mocher kelev, and if you exchange an animal for a dog, so that animal is also, because it's a bezayin, you can't use that as a carbon. B'kelayim, when it comes to forbidden breeds and mixtures of animals, of a treifa, as well as a treifa, as we know in general, a treifa is, you can't obviously bring that as a carbon, but it's still mutul hedjit. V'yaitze daifin, an animal, what's yaitze daifin, that was not born in the natural way, but through cesarean. So in all these cases, yirad shit stavu. So we don't kill the animals, but we have the animals graze until they develop a mum. So therefore, none of the animals, even the ones that we don't know which one they are, but the ones that actually are karbanos, we have to wait to be paided. So we have to wait until it gets a mum. Then you actually sell it. And then the most expensive one is the one that out of all the animals, you have to find which one's the most expensive one, and we'll say, well, maybe that's the one that was for the carbon. And therefore, you have to use that much money for it. Okay, so that's another case of the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah says, this arvu b'chulin. Let's say you have a carbon mixed up with a chulin, a non-carbon, just a regular animal, right? And it's tamimim, and the animal has no blemish. So yimachru hachulin l'tzarech ha'isah. So what you do is you'll sell yimachru hachulin. You'll sell that chulin l'tzarech ha'isah for the needs of that particular one. Let's look at Rashi. Yimachru kol hachulin. You have to sell all the chulin l'tzarech min ha'isah carbon for the needs of that particular carbon. But nimsas harikun kanshim min echad. They're all like from the same breed, same animals. El she'en yadua kol echad shomihu. We just don't know what's what, right? And whose is whose. So v'yikru kulan kol echad v'echad l'shem mishahu, etc. So basically, in this situation, we don't know whose it is. So in that case, you can sell it, and therefore you'll end up using that money for the carbon. Kodshim b'kodshim. Let's say again you have karbanos kodshim b'kodshim. So min b'minoi. Let's say they're different owners, right? Rashi says they're ba'leihin muchlokim. We have different owners. So yikrav kol echad l'shem mishahu. So everyone should be makriv it for whomever it is. So it's less problematic if it's even though it's two different people, but it's the same min, right? So kachim and kachim, if it's the same animal, we just don't know whose it is. So zeh yikra l'shem mishahu. This one will be makriv for whoever is the owner. But zeh yikra l'shem mishahu. So again, you'll be makriv both karbanos, saying, okay, whoever the owner is, that's what it is. Kachim and kachim. Let's say you have kachim and kachim again, but min b'shenu minoi. Here it's different animals, and somehow there was confusion. whose it is and what it's for. So yiru ad sheyistavu. V'yimacha v'yavi b'dmei hayafish behen mamin zeh u'b'nei hayafish behen mamin zeh. V'yav said hamaysim mebeisai. So basically, if there's more levels of doubt, so then both people have to rely on whatever is the more expensive animal. Maybe that's the one that was theirs, designated for their particular carbon, even though one person obviously didn't necessarily spend that much. So therefore, the difference comes from their own pockets. Nisarvu b'bechor b'meiser. Let's say you got mixed up a carbon, for example, Rashi is an ola b'bechor, an ola to a bechor, or a meiser behema shein tayvsin demehin b'kedusha, that their value is not typhus to kedusha. Lakriven efsher, so you can't be makriv them shezeh kol v'zeh nechol, because each one has different purposes. An ola is completely burned, and these karbanos, a bechor or mais behema, is consumed. So if ilahu shlomim, zetoin matan arba v'zeh matan achas v'chein smicha nesachim. So even if it's not an oila, we're talking about a shlomim and a bechor. So even though they're both eaten, but they still have different dinim, whether or not how many blood applications there are, and as well as smicha nesachim. So whether or not you require smicha and also have libations that accompany the carbon, so it's problematic no matter what. Not only if it's just an ola, which is definitely a problem because it's kolil, but even and this is not, but even if they're not both not kolil, still it's a problem. So in this abra b'char b'maisi yurachit stavu. So we make them develop a mum, and again v'yachil kibachor u'kamaiser, and you'll eat like bechor and like meiser. So what does that mean? Says Rashi, v'yavi mois. So let's get a mum. So you'll take the money, b'demei hayafa, whatever one is more expensive. The Yomi, you'll say kol makam shehu hazevach, whichever place is the carbon. Hatyphus is dama v'himachul hamois halol. It should be typhus onto this money. Nimsa chulin ma'oida b'bechor meiser bali mumin. So the chulin now is mixed with the bechor, and the meiser is a balmum b'yoichel muravim kulan b'toris bechor. Okay. So that's what is done. Hakoil, all the karbanos yichol l'sariv. All of these potential problems could happen when it comes to any different type of carbon. Chutz min hachatas va'asham. Now, when it comes to a chatas and an asham. Not sure why it only says an asham. Okay, but a chatas, says Rashi, she'ein misarvin zebazeh. A chatas and asham cannot get confused. Lafi shenikarin zemizeh. Right? There are different types of animals. One's a zachar, one's in the keva. We know a chatas in the keva, and really an ola is a zachar, but we use the example of an asham. Okay. We'll get back into that. Obviously, if the Torah prescribes that the animal must be a nekeva, and then you have a zachar over here, you're not going to get confused. You know that's not it. Okay, let's see the Gemara. Maya filu. What is this whole language over here that it says that it says filu somewhere, right? This okay. So Maya filu. Why can't I find this? So Kol Shekain, says Rashi, Kivan derubal amisa yamusu. So what does it mean even? So Kol Zevachim shezar b'machatos amesos o b'shar mesko afilu. That's the question of the Mishnah. If you have, let's say, one animal that's mixed up with all these other ones, even if it's 1 to 10,000, like what is that coming to add? We know it's not bottle, so what does it mean? Even this, says Rashi. Kol shekain kivan derubal amisi amusu. So if let's say the majority of them are supposed to be killed, so then what exactly is being said here, basically? So Kol Zevachim shnis arba behen chatois amesos. If you have a situation where you have all these karbanos and mixed in together is chatas amesos, one of the 5 situations where the chatas has to be destroyed. Shor haniskol, or you have one shore you have one shore, a few echad beribua, even if you have 10,000 heter, right, that's what it's talking about. You have 10,000 heter against the one. The problem is, I already explained the Mishnah Maskana, but that's what we're saying. Yamusu kul, and they're all killed. So basically, that it's just going to tell you the chiddush is that even if only there's one isser against so many others, Yamusu. Tanina chadazimna. Everything is beautiful, except the question is, it doesn't seem logical why the Mishnah has to even be here at all. Because we've learned these dinim elsewhere. Tanina chadazimna. We already learned this elsewhere in Masechtas Temura. It says as follows, right? I mean, and of course you already remember Temura. Well, it doesn't matter if you don't know what remember Masechtas Temura, but you should at least realize that if there's a Mishnah which is already learned, you don't need to learn it here again. Kol asurin legabe mizbeach, anything which is asur on the legabe mizbeach, which means it's pasal akrava, asurin b'chol shehin. So it's asur even the smallest amount, which means, and it says haroiva v'hanirva. So the question is why. There's another Mishnah already tells us this din apparently, that when there's a carbon mixed up with other carbonos, so the din is it'll answer everything. That's what this Mishnah says. The same thing. So what's the difference between the Mishnah there and the Mishnah here? So Ravashi Amrisul Shemaisa Kameda Rav Shimi. That's Trichen. Actually, you need both cases. They're two separate situations. Dimahasam, because you learn over there, you would think it's only when it has to do with Isser Absul Hakarava. However, it's Mutter Lehedjit. So maybe in like our case where it talks about Isser Legavoa, but it's Mutter Lehedjit, right? At least in the second case. So maybe in that situation, it tells us the din of a lehedjit, but if we're talking about where it's not only asul legavoa, but it's also asul lehedjit, it's asul bahana, emelo. Maybe you wouldn't think you would think not. Maybe you would think the din it's not batal. So v'ima hache, if you learn from here, have the mina hani hudi suri hananinhu. It's because there's mamish that's asul bahana. So maybe only when it's pasal hakrava and there's an isser lehedjit. So the isser, so you would think maybe without this Mishnah, our Mishnah, that the isser is batal barov. Maybe it is also a batal barov, since it isn't fit for padiyah, right? Because it's totally asmano. It's not fit for padiyah as it can't be used for private use, right? So since it can't be used for private use, so maybe you would have a havamino, so therefore maybe it is batal, because there's nothing else you can do, right? It's not like we say gavashishal materian or something like that. Basically, the point is that this is something which there's no other outlet. So since there's no other outlet, maybe we will allow some din of bittul. So the chiddush of our Mishnah is that when it's, and at least again we have to focus on the ratio. Of course, obviously we can ask a question on the Mishnah in the middle, but the point here is the first point of our Mishnah talks about a situation where it's pasal akarava and asul hedjit, which is we're talking about chata shemesos balet, right? Which has to be killed. So it's asul hedjit and everything. So in that situation, the Mishnah is required because you would think maybe the din is that it is batal b'roi because there's no other out. However, over there where it's talking about a case of mutter bahana, so maybe in that situation, it's not a problem, and therefore, because there is padiyah, maybe we're more machmir, and therefore you can't. It's not batal b'roi. You don't even need it. It's a davar pashut, right? On the other hand, mashiinkin. Why is it mentioned over there? A case of mutter bahana. So maybe the isser is more lenient. And therefore, since it's more lenient, so therefore maybe taka again, we should allow it. So that's what it's talking about. They're two separate situations. Again, if you have it over there, the imahasam over there, where there's a din of mutter bahana, so havamina hanimili legavoa, maybe it's only when it's something which is asul legavoa of lehedjit, because it's only asur l'gavoa, but it's mutter l'hedget. But over here, but in the case of l'hedget emelo, maybe you would think a case where it is asur l'hedget, so also, so then the din is not the same. Which is our case of lahani emelo tzricha. So basically, they're two separate cases. One is a case of they're both asur hakaraba, but one's mutal hana, one's asur hana. One's mutal hedge, one's asur hana. One's mutal hana, one's asur hana. Let's just keep it like that. So therefore, because they're two separate cases, so therefore you're allowed to have both mishnayos. They're both needed. Okay, that's the basic idea behind that. Let's look at Rashi. So Hanimili ligavoa, kulan hamuravin asurin ligavoa, ema nevatli isuri hana baruba. Maybe it is batal baruba. We're lenient. Shulyamusu el yirav yimchru. Maybe we won't kill it, but we'll let it graze. Deloi chamer din hedjit kuli high, because we're not so strict. Kamashmon yamusu that will kill it. Imahacha over here, Ashminan defilu hana emo lo asrin hulakulu elmanavata baruba vikravu sricha. So again, you can learn one or the other. Maybe we're going to be more lenient on either side. Okay. So the Gemara says the lavi suri hananhu ninhu hatanile. You're telling me cases where there's no isur hana hatanile. Our Mishnah also says that, right? So what are you talking about? So our Mishnah talks about a case also. It says Rashi, Hanat Masnisin, the loy batul gavoa, the Tana Masnisin is Arvi Bashor Shenevda. Right? So it does mention that case as well. Right? Our middle case of our Mishnah, also mentions, also is a situation of mutter lehedjit. So how does that really answer the question? So our Mishnah also addresses this. Hatanile. So mikatani bikama, does it say how much is aser? Kol shehein, bikama kol shehein. Hasam katani, over there it is mentioned. So in this they have a lo boyha. So the kanta etzrichale. It comes to tell us that the kana of what to do, namely you have to let it graze, which is our Mishnah. So hedinami tanule, ve'elu asurin ve'asurin b'chol shehein. Fine. So therefore hatakanta etzrichale. So the hedinami tanule. So over there it also mentions about hedjit, where it's something which is mutal hedjit. Ve'elu asurin ve'asurin b'chol shehein yain nesach ve'avodas kachavim. So this is a situation which is also mentioned. This is chulin lehedjit. So as we continue to Ayin Beis Amanov, tzricha di'im hasam over there have a mina lehedjit, of which is by the case of yain nesach and ve'avodas kachavim. Aval gavoa, but our case emelo nifsedinhu lekuhu. Maybe when we're dealing with kudshim, so maybe we don't want hektish to lose out, right? So therefore, maybe we're going to be more lenient when it comes to kudshim. If you only, or in our case, by kudshim, habiminahanimili kudshim, demayas, it would be repulsive to bring these karbanos as it's a kilayim or it's esnan zaina of a chulin, the lo moyas. It's not repulsive. Ematsuri hana. You would think maybe it is batal baroiv in that case. Sricha, so we need both cases. Adkan.